the recording. And welcome to all of our participants today. I'm Dr. Lindsay Pollock, Provost at Sarasota University. And normally I'm joined by my mentor and someone who I truly admired, Tim Selden, who is right now changing planes in O'Hare in Chicago. So he regrets that he can't be here with us today. And Clint Loesch is usually a co-host as well. And so I know Tim and Clint are here in spirit, but we're going to carry on. And we've got a really amazing, terrific uh, guest speaker today, Stevie Ray. And Stevie,
Oh,
and
me.
yeah, you. Stevie and Dr. Summers and I were just discussing Bill's recent knee replacement. So, Bill, we're all wishing you the very best. And that discussion led us to think about the scar tissue that we might carry with us into leadership. And whether or not we interrogate that idea any further today remains to be seen. But at this time, I'd like to introduce our amazing speaker, Stevie Ray. Stevie comes to us from the Twin Cities, and his unique message combines two of his greatest passions, improvisation and the martial arts. As executive director of Stevie Ray's Improv company, one of the longest running improv organizations in the United States, Stevie uses this centuries old art form to help professionals gain new skills. He is also a martial arts expert with four. I didn't know you could even get four black belts. But he has them. As a writer and thought leader, Stevie was a national columnist for the Business Journal newspapers and is the author of 12 books. Stevie is the only person in the United States to design his own college degree, theory and performance of comedy. Stevie, we're so honored to have you here today. And I'll turn it, well, actually, before I turn it over to you, Bill wanted to just say a little something as well.
Well, one of the reasons that I think Stevie is very timely is educators all over are trying to figure out how do I get attention of the students away from iPhones, also and build that collaboration. So Stevie has worked in about 5 or 6 schools where I've been principal, and on everything from creativity, communication, conflict, teamwork, etc. So I'm just really pleased that Stevie will give us an hour here or let's see, 4 hours. Is that what you said? Okay. I just wanted to see if he was paying attention. Okay, Stevie, take it away.
Hey, I'll go for 4 hours. I'm not sure there will be the number of participants at the end. That's when we started. Um, uh, the 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 keynote that I offer and the workshops that I offer all come from a very interesting mix of disciplines. Um, Way back in college, um, when I was walking through the student union and on my way to dinner, I happened to turn over and look into the main area of the student union where they have performances and demonstrations. And there was this very short Japanese gentleman in a karate uniform throwing people around. And I had to see what it was what was all about. I walked over to him. I said, I'd like to join. And he said, okay, you come to the wrestling room at 6 o'clock Tuesday. That was it. There's no registration forms. You know, this was the old days. And he was he was an interesting gentleman when it comes to the martial arts because he was only 4'10", fully grown. And
Wow.
yes, he grew up in Tokyo. And at that time, in that generation, the adults were all out working, doing their thing. And so he got very strongly bullied after school and during school, being a short young man. So he did something that very few Japanese will do or will actually accept. And that is he trained in multiple different styles. Uh, because in Japan, they believe in mastery of one thing. So you get into one discipline and you become a master, and that's it. So you don't study multiple things like we do here in America. They have a philosophy: man who chases two rabbits gets no dinner. But the martial arts, largely in Japan, is for self-perfection. He wanted self-protection. So he studied karate, judo, aikido, boxing, weaponry, everything.
Wow.
So when I first started training with him, he taught the same way. He taught us everything he knew. And he would do half the class in one discipline, the other half of the class in another, and really mix it up. But the thing that surprised me was that at 4'10" and much older than us students, he could still defeat every student in the class. And
Wow.
I couldn't understand why. I eventually became his head assistant. So I asked him one day, why is it with those of us who are younger, stronger, faster, we have a longer reach, which does affect somebody when you're in a match. We outweigh you, which is another advantage. You still are able to defeat us, even with all these advantages. Why can you do that? And he said, because you don't own your space.
Oh.
And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, you come in here and you see my rank and my experience and my uniform, and you immediately think I'm better than you before we even begin. So I own your space. You must learn through the martial arts to own your space. And I said, okay, well, how do I do that? He said, by doing it in all areas of life. He said, let me talk to you about being a young man, because you are very easily defeated because you get emotionally involved in things. In the martial arts, you become afraid or angry or frustrated if something doesn't go your way. But in life, you become angry and frustrated and afraid when things don't go your way, and you handle it poorly. He said, you are always thinking about what's fair. Fair this, fair that, fair this. Everything's not fair if it's not right. And he said, in Japan, I was raised to not think about what's fair. We believe in karma. And he said, do you know what karma is? I said, I know, I've heard the word. I really can't describe it. He said, I'll tell you what karma is. Crap floats around and it sometimes lands on you. That's karma. And he said, when it does, it was your turn. Everybody has to have a turn having crap float on them. And he said, but in America, especially at your age, nobody wants to take their turn. Something bad happens, it's always somebody else's fault, or why did it happen? It just did.
Interesting.
And he said, he told me an old Zen story of a Zen master and his student walking through the woods, and they come upon a stream, and there's another old man sitting by the stream. And that old man looks at the Zen master and says, you pick me up and carry me across this stream. I don't want to get my clothes wet. The Zen master picks him up and starts walking across the stream. And the whole way, the old man on his back is saying, walk faster. I've got someplace to be. Pick me up higher. My feet are getting wet, the whole thing. And when they set him down and the student was walking with his master after that, the student kept saying, I can't believe you picked that guy up and carried him. He was so sarcastic to you. He didn't even ask nicely. And the Zen master looked at his student and said, well, if he had asked politely, would you have carried him across? And the student said, well, of course. So the Zen master said, he weighs the same whether he's polite or not. You are deciding how to behave based on other people's behavior and values. I behave the way I behave regardless of the people around me. And the student couldn't quite wrap his head around that. And they kept walking, and mile after mile, the student is saying, I can't believe you just let that guy. Oh. After a while, the Zen master looked at his student and said, I put him down back at the stream. You're still carrying him. And so my karate instructor said, you can't carry things that hurt you or do you no good. And you just have to live your life the way you should. That's owning your space. He said, In a confrontation, if it's a physical match, like here in our martial arts studio, my goal is to try to wrap my arms around you and control you and throw you to the ground and do all that. In life, people will do that with words, with attitude,
Yes.
with behavior.
Yes.
Their words are trying to wrap around you. And he said, you always have to defend against everything coming at you in a way that works, not in a way that causes even more consternation or antagonism. And he said, so you have to defend yourself. And then I said, okay, what is the best defense against any attack? And of course, as a young man in college, I was thinking about the Bruce Lee movies and everything. I was like, oh, this is going to be a really cool technique. And he said, he sounded exactly like Mr. Miyagi from The Karate Kid, only he wasn't as nice. He said, you want to know best defense against any attack? I said, yes. Don't be there. I said, what are you talking about? Don't be there. He's right there. He said, no, don't be there up here. He said, physically, it's easy. Like he said, in karate, you're taught to block. Well, that's force on force.
Right.
Stronger person always wins. In life, if it's force on force, stronger person always wins. The relationship is destroyed. In judo, you're learned to throw people to the ground using their force against them. In Aikido, which is a martial art many have heard of, but some are not familiar, Aikido is a very unique martial art that entirely focuses on the energy and the direction that your opponent is going in when they attack you, and you do not oppose it. You don't block it. You don't grab. You take their energy and redirect it, and then they end up in a hold in which you control them. Neither of you are injured, but you have the situation under control. Mm-hmm. It's a very ancient martial art, very difficult to master. But he said, try to attack me, and I'll show you not being there. And I came after him, and he just stepped aside. And I just went right past him. I said, okay, not going to let that happen again. So I gathered up all my strength and speed and my young man ego, and I really came after him. And he just went whoop, to the side, whoop, to the side. And at one point, he took my arm that was coming out at him, and he kept it going in the direction I was going, but he redirected it, and I ended up on my back. And I didn't feel a thing. And I said, how did I end up here? He said, don't be there. Don't be there for an attack. Step aside. I said, but what about all the fancy kicks and doing the stuff? He said, you can do that, but then you get sweaty. You know, why work at it? And so he pounded in the message of just don't be there. Don't be there for the attack. So later on, I would carry this into my profession. And when I started learning improvisation, improvisation is a very unique form of comedy in that most people are familiar with stand-up comedy, obviously, a solo performer delivering prepared material. For those unfamiliar with improvisation, there's a TV show called Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yes.
It was on TV for years. It's not on TV anymore, but you can get it on YouTube. If you're unfamiliar with improv, check out Whose Line Is It Anyway? And it's very fun, where a troupe of performers will take ideas from the audience, and then they will create instant comedy based on the suggestions given by the audience. And I knew that I wanted all forms of comedy to be part of my career. So I've studied and performed stand-up comedy, sketch comedy, like you see on Saturday Night Live, as well as improv. But improv is unique in that it did not start out the same way in different places around the world. It started in England in the early to late 1950s. It started in America throughout that same time period. There was a gentleman in Brazil who was creating an improv form. All of them were for different purposes. Not all of them were for theater. Not all of them were for comedy. In the 30s through the 50s in Chicago, there was a movement of professionals in education, sociology, and psychology. They were trying to improve education, working off the knowledge that lecture is very often ineffective. It's not the worst thing you can do. It really depends on how you do it. If you're a great storyteller, lecture is great. If all you do is talk facts and figures, people want to drink bleach, you know. So they created something called game theory of education.
Huh.
And it was based on the idea that if you have an interactive exercise or a game, and the learning objective is buried within it, the lesson is more easily comprehended and retention is longer. That was one of the foundings of improvisation, was to teach largely school-age children more effectively. One of the founders of improv, her name is Viola Spolin in Chicago. She was also hired by the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, through FDR. And in Chicago at that time, in the 50s, or no, she would have been in the 40s and early 50s, a lot of immigrants coming into Chicago, and language barriers and social customs and things like that were a barrier to getting employment. So she was hired by the WPA to teach communication and interaction skills solely so immigrants could get jobs. She used improv, and it was based on game theory of education. Her son, Paul Sills, he grew up every day after school going to his mom's workshop and seeing this in action. And then he went to the University of Chicago, which at the time was a unique institution because it was kind of that freewheeling 50s era. You could go to classes even if you weren't enrolled. You could just sit in. You weren't going to get a degree, but you could sit in and learn. They didn't have a theater department, but people put on their own productions anyway. He and a few other gentlemen started using his mother's improv techniques to create sketches that were satirical, political in nature, because, you know, we're talking about the late 50s. And though after they graduated, they went on to form the Second City Theater in Chicago, using Viola Spolin and her mentors' improv techniques solely for theater and comedy. He eventually quit Second City because he thought they weren't social-minded enough. And
interesting.
He went on to form another theater company because he wanted it to be social commentary, satire. He actually wanted it to be for the masses. And so he wanted his troupe to go to lumber yards and steel mills, and he wanted to put on performances for the working folks and really stir things up. I got a chance to train with Paul Sills shortly before his death. After he retired, he moved up to Door County, Wisconsin, and he bought a farmhouse with a barn and turned the barn into a theater. Can you get any more classic than that?
Wow.
And he offered week-long intensive master's workshops. People from around the world would apply, and he would only accept 16 people. And if you got accepted, it was a big deal. So I was fortunate enough to be part of one of these. And on the first day, he's this crotchety old man, and he's in his 80s. And he said, all right, everybody, we're going to spend the next week working on one skill and one skill only. And we thought we were going to learn the master of improv, you know, all these techniques of improv. He said, just going to teach you how to own your space. And I thought, wait a minute. You know, a decade ago, I heard this from a martial arts master, the same phrase. And now I'm learning it in improv. And it struck me that that is the key to success in any endeavor. How do you own your space? Because in the martial arts, we are taught you don't own your space to dominate other people. You own your space to protect other people who can't protect themselves. And in improvisation, we are taught that you own your space by, surprisingly, for improv, by doing your homework. because one of the things we were taught by all the masters I've been able to train with in improvisation is improv is not this freewheeling, do whatever you want. There's a very strong structure to how you perform as a group and make it work. And the phrase we use is creativity is born of structure. Without structure, you can't create.
Huh.
I got a call one day after my organization was founded in 1989. So we're going into our 36th year, which is odd because I'm only 40. Thank you. And we have many people teaching improv classes in our school. And when my business partner and co-director, her name is Pamela Main, when we started the organization in 1989, we said, we want to use improv for more than just comedy. We want to go back to the roots. So we opened our classes to the non-performing artist. Most of our students don't want to perform. They want to learn self-confidence, communication skills, speaking ability, teamwork, or just get out of the house and have fun, play in an adult sandbox for a change. One day I get a phone call and I'm in the office. Hello. Hi, my name is Bill Summers. Who are you? He said, you don't know me. I just joined one of your improv classes. And I have to talk to you about it because it was last night. The reason I joined was I had no intention of jumping into an improv class, but I'm a principal at a local school and I'm talking to one of my teachers in the hallway the other day. And I said, you know what being a principal is? Improv. You have your whole day planned and you never know when an upset parent might show up or a student with a special need might walk into your office or a teacher's issue might come up. And I got to change and adapt to anything. I should do improv. And the teacher said, well, guess where I'm going tonight? To my very first improv class at a place called Stevie Ray's Improv Company. You should come with me. And Bill went, oh, crap. Now I got to put my money where my mouth is.
Right.
But he called me the next day and he said, I am shocked at what happened. I walked into a room and there are 16 total strangers. And by the end of 2 hours, they are all working cooperatively toward a common goal as if they've been friends for years. How did you do that? And I said, well, I didn't. You did. I wasn't even there. Your teacher facilitated. He said, I have to learn more about this improv stuff because I honestly think every principal and educator in America should learn improv. So that's when we started pushing toward other things. It was very shortly after the founding of our organization and we were teaching our classes for the public that an executive came up to me who was an improv student. And he's an account rep for the agriculture giant Cargill. And he said, I used that technique you taught me last week with a client call where I needed to resolve a very tough issue. And it really helped smooth things out. I said, great, that's what we were hoping for. And he said, have you ever thought of going to companies directly instead of waiting just for individuals to come and take a class? I hadn't thought of that. But we at Stevie Ray's have a one-word business plan. That word is okay. So I said, okay. We started calling up companies and saying, we teach improv for the workplace. It was a really tough sell because back in 1989, very few people even knew what improv was. Sure. And those that had any inkling at all just knew of it as comedy.
Sure.
So the most common pushback I got was, well, you're not going to try to teach us how to be funny, are you? Well, no, this is about skill building. And it eventually caught on. And now improv in the workplace is quite common. But back when we started it, it was not. So my keynotes are titled Own Your Space, because I want people to learn the techniques of owning their space in any difficult situation. My workshops are called Improv That Works. And I have to give that title to Pam, my business partner. She's the one that created it because she said it's improv at work and you make it work for you. So we use the techniques that are taught in classic improvisation to help people handle difficult challenges. And the thing that surprises people the most is that the majority of the training in the first few months, people will take an improv class anywhere from as short as 6 weeks to some have been with me for seriously 20 years because it's an ongoing process. But the biggest surprise people have is that the first few months are all about listening skills. It's
Wow.
not how do you think on the spot? How do you think quickly? Really, people don't need that skill. We all think pretty fast. We all have the same brain. I will excuse some politicians from that statement, but you think fast, but you do things that get in the way and
Yeah.
stop you from reacting.
Well,
Uh,
that's surprising to me, Stevie, because I
yeah,
would have thought the same. You know, when I think of improv, I think of that rapid fire, clever response, you know, and I'm always so admiring of people in that improv environment because I think, oh my gosh, how'd they think of that? I would never have thought to come back with that response. But to hear you say that listening is the first skill is really surprising to me.
we play various games. I'll describe them. Some of them are not possible over a video conference like this,
Sure.
but first of all, improvisation is a group process, obviously,
Hmm.
instead of a solo process. I love the phrase in improv that in improvisation, there are no stars. It's nobody wins unless we all win. And if one person stands out, that's not what we're after. We're after the group
Hmm.
looking good. So it's a cooperative process. So one exercise, it's quite simple to understand, but it's difficult to actually perform. It's a 5 minute conversation is what it's called. And I will say that improvisation, every company has different names for their exercises and games. It's kind of like trading baseball cards. So that's what we happen to call it. You pair up, say you and I are a pair. You would be assigned to talk first. And when the instructor says go, you have to talk for 5 straight minutes. And I
Okay.
have to listen without speaking for 5 straight minutes. And you have to talk about yourself for 5 minutes. You can't
Ah.
talk about the weather or sports or anything like that. It's about you. At the end, at the end of the 5 minutes, I have to repeat back every single thing I remember you saying.
Oh,
So that is a mental challenge because when you listen to somebody talk, your mind is going in 100 different directions. You latch
right.
onto a few things, you ignore a few things. You got to remember everything. The winner is the person who can remember the most. But we also put the responsibility on both shoulders because we talk to our students and say, all right, what makes it possible to remember 5 minutes of somebody else's talk?
Yeah, 5 minutes is a long time. And
It is.
for me, I have a tendency for my mind to wander when I'm
Well,
listening to someone. In full transparency, it's hard to
yeah.
stay attuned to someone for that long.
Well, we have a word for people like you, human. Uh, you know, that's how it works for all of us. But when we ask people what makes it possible to remember, most students say, well, I have to concentrate a lot. I have to
Hmm.
focus. I have to clear out distractions, everything else. We say you're missing a key element. They have to be memorable.
Ah.
If I talk for 5 minutes and I'm like, okay, so then after I graduated high school, then I went on to college. It's, you're not going to remember a thing. Memory is a factor of three elements: primacy, frequency, and urgency.
Mm.
Primacy, first and last thing we experience, we remember more, and the last thing has more power than the first thing. Frequency, the more frequent something happens, the more it sticks in our brain.
Sure.
Urgency, it's either important to us or it has an impact on our thinking, like it's a surprise, or it causes laughter or anger, some emotional quality. When we speak to people, we can only control one of those three things: urgency. We
Hmm.
cannot control primacy or frequency. I mean, we can repeat things over and over to try to make sure they stick. The risk there is that you very often cross over into frustrating instead of
Hmm.
memorable. The
Right.
more you repeat something, the more we just want to get rid of it. So we have to be memorable. And how do you do that? You have to acknowledge what works for connection.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that surprised me the most in my training is we've done a lot of looking into neuroscience as it relates to improv, because improv is about connecting with people, communicating, and having an impact. And neuroscience is about the wiring of the brain.
Sure.
So the visual cortex of the human brain evolved long before the auditory cortex did.
Hmm.
It's twice as big. So the eyes rule our memory and our decision making. Whatever we see is much more important than what we hear. And when you get to the hearing, the brain is not wired to listen to or remember words. The only words we really remember are the ones that have great impact because they stand out. Those are very few.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the conversations we have, we will not remember the words chosen. The ear hears tone, inflection, and pitch. So if I say, so after I graduated high school, then I went to college and I decided to major in education because I wanted to work at the university level. Here, no pitch, no tone, no
Oh,
inflection,
nothing.
words only. Oh
Yeah.
my God, the brain hates that. Because now you are asking the brain to use its least efficient function. And for leaders and communicators, it's important to remember the brain's efficient and inefficient functions. Least efficient, information processing. That happens in the prefrontal cortex. That was the last part of the brain to grow as humans evolved from hominins to Neanderthals and Homo sapiens and Homo erectus. The prefrontal cortex was the last thing to come along. And it is the last part of the brain to activate in human maturity. The prefrontal cortex activates in female brains between the ages of 19 and 21 on average. And, you know, that's the part of the brain that handles executive thought, strategic
Right.
planning, understanding consequences for behavior. So for males, the prefrontal cortex activates around the age 70. So it's different. So if you just use information, you are accessing the least efficient function of the brain. It
Mm-hmm.
shuts down so quickly. But if you access the efficient part of the brain, I'll ask you, Lindsay, take a guess. What is the most efficient function of the human brain?
Oh, Lord.
And
Huh.
it's not bodily functions like eating, sleeping, that kind of thing. What mental function is the most efficient?
Well, I guess I think survival and safety um, first, because without that, our mind can't process anything else. So
Right.
I think of the fight or flight or fight, flight or freeze, the function in our brain to maintain our physical uh, existence.
This goes along with that because that all happens in the amygdala.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually, there's now 4 responses identified by the amygdala: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn.
Oh,
Fawn is acquiescing, is making sure someone else's anger subsides so you are safe. So we all do a combination of one of those 4 at any one time. But the most efficient function of the human brain is pattern recognition.
oh, interesting.
It's actually called the brain's default operating system. We don't know it's there, but anytime we are not engaged in one particular mental task, we go right back to looking for patterns. Because as soon as we find a pattern, we fall into it, we create a habit around it, it makes us
Mm-hmm.
productive and stress-free. Patterns
Right,
are wonderful for our life. I mean, imagine if you had to think about how to get to the store every day. You don't want
right,
to.
And also think about Montessori philosophy about building patterns.
Yep, the pattern part of the brain is so good. Well,
absolutely.
if I don't add inflection, tone, pitch, your brain isn't going to latch on. But the
Right.
visual cortex is even more important. So if I don't add gestures, if you don't move, you can't be heard. That's how
Mm,
it works. Because if you, and I've seen professors and teachers, because I do training for educators, and I've watched them, and if they stand motionless and just talk, They are focused on the information. The listener's brain doesn't care because that's too much work. We've got to care about the message, not the information. So simple gestures, they are a visual representation of the idea being presented. So if
Mm-hmm.
I stand here like this and say, okay, there are three really important things to keep in mind when communicating. The first and most important, right about now, your brain is starting to have to work. And I guarantee you,
Right,
half
I'm
the
starting to
people,
check out. Yep.
yep, and they start looking down at the phone, whatever. But if I gesture, there are three really important things to keep in mind when interacting with people. The first and most important, you see what my hands are doing?
Absolutely.
Giving your visual cortex something to access.
Right.
If you want to own your space, you have to own your body. You have
Mm.
to own the space with your body. When I first started training with Paul Sills, one of the exercises he said, and all of these sounded pretty weird to us students until he got us into it. He said, I want you to walk around the space. Just move around the space. Walk in space is what he called it. And we're just walking. He said, don't walk in a circle. I want you to walk randomly and just move around the space. Now look around you. There's 15 other students with you. Who owns their space? Who doesn't? Just by their walk. He said, you've already decided whether you trust them. You've already decided whether you want to work with them, whether you're excited by them, or you want to avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
By that, he said, now let the space support you. He says support comes from the earth around us. Lift it up. Same concept as in the martial arts. The earth supports you, not your muscles, but your surroundings. And he said, now when you carry yourself, you own your space. Movement is part of that. I worked with one corporate executive on his presentation skills. He never moved at all. So I took his script and I said, okay, what are you saying here? You're talking about the global insurance patterns. This was a real exciting speech, let me tell you. And I said, okay, make a gesture that means global to you because it's different for everybody. He said, like that. I said, good. Write that in your script. We actually scripted the gestures,
The movements and the
the
gestures. Sure.
whatever it was. I said, everybody takes baby steps until it becomes natural. Everyone does. Some people learn it as a 5-year-old. Some people learn it as a 45-year-old.
Sure.
Everybody has to learn it. So after he got comfortable, he didn't need the scripted part anymore. He just moved more. But he had to learn that part of it. Owning your space means owning your body and your voice. And then we worked on his voice. I said, what is important about what you're saying? And I said, what do you want people to go away with? He said, I said, what emotion is tied to your message? I want them to be excited. I said, okay, here's how you were speaking, trying to get them excited. Well, I'm really excited about this global insurance pattern that we're beginning to see. I said, my God, you sound so excited that you want to die. So it has to be this. The voice is music, pitch, and tone, and rests, whole notes, half notes, rests. It's music. So we played a game that we do in improv. Gibberish talk. I said, I want you to deliver your speech in gibberish, knowing that the only thing that is going to reach me are your inflections and your movements. And I will guess what you're saying based on how I feel it. And he had to stand up there going, and I said, I can't, at the end I said, I don't know the technical message, but I knew you wanted me to feel urgent at this point, frightened about this thing, and excited about this thing. And he said, that's exactly what I wanted you to feel. I said, those are the only things I'm going to remember.
Yeah.
I feel leaving the room.
Right.
Leaders have to get people to feel things, period. Because that's what we follow, is an emotional leader. I will study speakers. The ones we can access the easiest are politicians. because
Sure.
they're on TV every day. Um, and I watch them to see what techniques they use. And I turn to my wife, who is frankly sick of me, talking about this, but she has to listen because I have to listen about her job. Um, but I will say that person's going to lose the election.
Mhm.
She'll say, how do you know? I said, look at them. They're,
Yeah.
and I said, and I won't name politicians because that gets into a different thing. But I said, that one's too smart.
Hmm.
So that one will make a good statesperson, a cabinet member of some kind, because they can handle all the policy behind the wheel of turning over here. But that person's going to get elected because they move people. They are not afraid to stand apart from everybody else, which leaders have a challenge of doing, standing apart from everybody else and owning it.
Absolutely. Stevie Soraya in the chat commented that freedom of movement is the most important for children in the environment. The brain and movement are connected. Wow, it's aligned to what you described. I think that that really is true. And, as school leaders, Stevie, so often, I know for myself, I'm called um, to ask my staff, ask my faculty to, that call to move to action, whether that's implementing a district initiative, encouraging folks to get their grades in on time, asking people to stay after for a special event or chaperone a field trip on the weekend. And I know from my experience, my delivery made a difference. The way
Okay.
that I was presenting that information could, change a person's mind about what it was that I was asking of them. If I was speaking with gratitude, if I was speaking with dread, if I was speaking with annoyance, and sometimes it wasn't even intentional. I wasn't fully aware. I know early in my career, I was not always aware of what I was telegraphing
Mm.
in my messages because I had developed some bad habits over the course of time, and I wasn't really understanding the impact of tone and pitch and even the rhythm, the
Yeah.
pace that I was speaking, or if I was tired, that could change the tone of a message to my staff, to my employees, and also to my students, or even parents who might be listening to a recorded message that I was sending out by phone, or even an address at a PTO meeting. It's people, as you say, they're not always picking up on the words we're speaking, but they're picking up on the body language. They're picking up on um, sort of that hidden message in what we're saying.
And the part that goes along with the prefrontal cortex not liking to work is the common rule that most people are aware of, and that's the rule of three, is that the brain accepts everything in patterns of three because one thing occurring is of course not a pattern. Two things in a row, we're not sure it's a pattern yet. It could be coincidence. Three things in a row, that's a pattern. And so the
Mm,
brain has evolved to accept information in groups of three. And I liken it to when somebody buys a house and they go to a closing and you got to sign all
mhm.
the documents. Well, the closing agent by law has to explain everything on every page so you know what you're signing. Anybody
Right.
who's ever closed on a house or a loan, it's like, okay, this page means this page means this page means this page means this. By the time you're halfway through, you're thinking, I will just sign anything.
Right.
You could be stealing me blind and I don't know.
Right.
And that's because it's information without pattern.
Right.
But if I sit down with somebody and say, okay, there's some really important information that you need to keep in mind. That phrase right there stresses out the listener, because now we know we got to think. And it is much easier, and this is definitely true for educators and leaders, it's easier to speak than it is to listen. When you know what you're going to say, your mouth just goes.
Sure.
When you listen to teenagers and young adults speak at their rate of speech, it's so fast. They don't know yet that it is difficult to listen. So they're
Mhm.
blah, 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 blah. You'll say, what did you say? Oh, I just told you. Yeah, it's easier to speak than to listen. Remember that.
Yes.
So when you deliver information, you have to realize people don't want it. If I were to say to someone, instead of, there's a lot of information that's really important for you to keep in mind, if I said, it's only 3 things you got to remember, instantly the listener relaxes. The
Mhm.
brain can accept information better because it's relaxed. And I just give 3 things. If you give a 4th item to remember, people will not remember the first 3 and forget the 4th. They'll forget all 4.
Interesting.
That stress causes the
Sure.
brain to clear it out. Another very important technique we use in improvisation, which is key to all of my workshops, and every profession and industry I've ever worked with has used this. It's a classic improv rule called yes and. Yes and, I'm going to type it in as it appears. Yes and was created a long, long time ago in the world of improv. Before Second City, the group left the University of Chicago and they went down to St. Louis, Missouri, and they formed an organization called the Compass Players. So they were doing sketch comedy and improv. And this was in the early mid 50s. Well, improv was in its infancy, so people were it was half and half. Their shows were okay, but not really successful. About 50% of their work was hitting well. And every night after the show, the whole group would go to the kitchen in the house that they all rented and sit around the kitchen table and talk about the show. And they were trying to figure out how to get a better success rate with their work. And finally, they started coming to some agreements. And they eventually called them the kitchen table rules. They eventually became what is formally known as the 8 rules of improv that we follow today. Well, the first thing they realized was we seem to do better when we agree with each other than when there is conflict. Because in comedy, there's very often conflict that drives it. But if the conflict goes overboard, then it's out of control. So they created a rule, and they also discovered that when the audience calls out a suggestion, it's fair game. It's an open field. So if Bill and I are on stage and the audience calls out a plumber, well, he walks in and he starts doing a movement. He starts miming this. I'm on the side and I've got to figure out how to enter that. And I'm trying to figure out how we can work together to create a coherent scene. In his mind, he's thinking, I am scooping water out of the bathtub because it's not draining. Well, that's in his mind.
Right.
And he thinks I'm a homeowner and I'm the father. When I walk in, I say, well, sir, is this job going to cost what you thought it would? Or are you going to have to call in an additional plumber to work with you? So there's my assumption. And in improv, we call them assumptions. Well, in his mind, I'm his child and he's the father. Well, I can't tell you how often people have done what we in improv call negating, where I say, well, sir, is it going to cost a lot? I'm not the plumber, I'm your dad. What does that look like to an audience? 2 crazy people who don't know what they're doing.
Right.
Well, yes and means you cannot negate. You have to acknowledge what's given to you. It becomes the reality, and you have to add something. And equal participation on all sides in an atmosphere of agreement keep things moving. So if he thinks he's the dad, but I walk in and say, well, how's it going, Mr. Plumber? He has to say, well, it's taking a little longer than I thought, so I may have to call in somebody else. He's acknowledging me and adding something. Now I acknowledge that and add something and add and add. It's a building block process. The way we've taken this into the work world is negations are not just harmful for improv,
Mhm.
they are harmful for communication. The
Yes.
reason is negations include the words but or
Mhm.
however. Yeah, but is a negation. Psychologists have discovered the effect on the brain of negating. Whenever we use the word but, the listener cannot remember what came before it, and then they don't trust what comes after it. The way
I
that
want to just affirm what you are saying, Stevie, because Bill introduced this concept to me. Bill has been a longtime mentor of mine, and when he introduced me to this concept of yes and, it was a total game changer in my conversations with others. I had a tendency, I one of my strengths, for better or worse, is better way. So I'm always looking for a way to um, improve on what's been, or a suggestion that is being put forth. I'm always thinking about the next step. So unbeknownst to me, so many times I would say to the person, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea, but
ah
have you thought of X, Y, and Z?" And once Bill brought this to my attention, and a couple of times, I have to say, when Bill first told me about this, I wasn't a total believer. And I thought, oh, okay, Bill, all right, I'll think about that. And the next time I was in a conversation and I said, well, yeah, but I could feel the other person's energy just kind of shut down. And I thought, "Oh man, I've been shooting down other people's ideas and draining this energy out of my team unintentionally. It wasn't my desire to harm anyone, and yet here I was. I wasn't thinking about that impact a simple word would
well,
have on the other person."
it's a psychological trigger word.
Yeah.
And the word trigger has been expanded into far beyond what psychology first intended it. A trigger word affects the listener's brain in a negative way that they are unaware of and can't control. So,
Yeah.
triggering is not just, I don't like that word or it makes me uncomfortable. That's something else.
Yeah.
Trigger words are very harmful because they damage the communication process, not just the mood. I've
Yes.
played this game before where I will pick somebody out of an audience and I'll say, you're going to be an employee of mine and I'm going to be a manager. And we're going to play this like you normally see in a workplace setting, because I'll ask the group, how many of you have been told the advice? If you're going to give some negative feedback, start with a positive or do the critique sandwich, positive, negative, end with a positive. And a lot of people raise their hand. And I say, that's horrible advice. It was never created by a psychologist. That technique came from a manager who was uncomfortable being honest, because that approach makes it easier for the deliverer, not the receiver. So I'll say to this person in the audience, I'm going to start by giving you a little feedback. And I want everybody in the audience to say the word but when you know I'm about to say it. And I'll say, okay, Lindsay, thanks for coming in today. I have your evaluation here. First of all, your coworkers really like your attention to detail. You're one of those that can find any little potential obstacle and clear it out beforehand. So it makes every process a lot more effective. And at that moment, everybody in the audience goes, but now here's what surprised me. Because when I read the research about the triggering effect, I thought, this is too extreme. They're making it seem harsher than it is. But I have done this thousands of times. And at that moment, I look at the person I'm working with and I say, what did I just get done saying? And I can't tell you how often they say, gosh, I don't remember. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Negations clear out every positive thing you said. So why say them?
Yeah.
And I point out the fact that children are trusted instantly, whereas adults are not. Why is that? Because children are honest. If Bill and I are playing a game of tag and he pushes me down, I don't start with a positive. As a child, I don't say, well, I understand you're working on your assertiveness, Bill, and that's a good thing. However, moving forward in tag, it's like, no, you're a weird child. Get away from me. A child would say, don't, that hurt. Leaders have to be honest. This is where the combination of martial arts and improv come together.
Yes.
Speak it, own it, do it. And that is, oh, that thing you did, that doesn't work for us. So we'd appreciate if you don't do that again. Don't couch it with, and you're good at other things. We know that. Now we don't trust you because you've negated. When I first started training in improv, this is how I learned to avoid negations. And it was extreme. I moved into the Twin Cities after college, and I roomed with 3 other guys. So we're all young men, all improv professionals. And they had all been living together for a while before me. And they said, we have a rule for our household, no negating. Which means, I said, well, how does that show up in when we're not doing improv? They said, if one of the guys starts a bit, and in comedy, they're called bits, not jokes or routine. If one guy starts a bit, everybody has to go along with it and yes and it for as long as that guy keeps it going. I got my first taste of this that weekend. They said, we're going to a party. You want to come? I said, sure. I don't know anybody in town. I'll meet some new people. I show up and the host opens the door and she says, hi, guys. Who's your friend? Before I could introduce myself, they said, this is Jed from Oklahoma. He's visiting for the weekend. I had to become Jed from Oklahoma for the whole party. I had to improvise. People were saying, oh, where are you from? I said, oh, Jasper, Oklahoma. It's about 30 miles south of Oklahoma City. What do your parents do? Oh, they're shepherds. We raise sheep. We sell lambs and wool. I had to keep it going because I didn't start the bit. The guy who started it wouldn't stop it. One day, all 4 of us walked into a diner. We knew the people at this diner. We've been there all the time. We sat down. We're going to have lunch, go see a matinee movie. Server comes over. Hi, guys. What do you want? One guy looks at me and says, well, Morty, I don't know. I'm looking at the menu they got, but they don't have. I don't see what they got. What do you think? I had to be Morty. So I turned to the next guy and said, well, Shecky, I think the pastrami is good. What do you think? Pretty soon you got 4 old Jewish guys sitting in a booth. The guy who started it wouldn't stop. We had to continue yes-anding. We missed the matinee.
Oh, no.
We sat in that booth. And when we got done, we left. We tipped really well, trust me. To this day, if any of those 3 guys comes and visits my improv shows and we have them perform as a guest, if I'm on the stage with any of those 3 guys, we can improvise instantly without it feeling like there's been a moment lost between us. And my troop members say, how can you do that? I said, you be Shecky for 3 hours in a diner where you have to yes and. In my daily life, if I get into a disagreement with my wife, it's usually because she forgets I'm always right. We'll give her that. I want to say, well, yeah, but that is the amygdala thinking.
Sure.
That's a reaction, not a thought. I have to yes and it. Now, yes doesn't mean you agree. Yes means you acknowledge.
Right.
I replace the word but with if, and, or so. Yeah, I know you want to go to that restaurant. So, and we got really poor service there last time. So that word so leads to a solution.
Yeah.
Either one of us can come up with it. Or, my stepdaughter says, I want to take the car and whatever. Well, we could do that if I didn't have this meeting. And so why don't you wait till after the meeting? I replaced but and however with if, and, or so as a mental exercise every day of my life. That way, when the moment of truth comes and I'm on the spot, then I have the skills needed to handle that challenge.
I love that. And that builds teams, that builds relationship, that builds that sense that you are working with folks that you can count on and you can trust.
Yep.
Yeah. I think those are just magic words for leaders.
That's what I would say for anyone watching.
Yeah.
If you could take away one thing from today, try to go through an entire day without saying but or however. It is really difficult, very often requires a family member or a friend to call you on it because we don't know that we've said it. It just flies out. But
Absolutely.
we play the games where it's, oh, you said but. You said but. With those roommates, whoever said but had to do the dishes.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. And when you're developing that muscle, that habit, having an accountability partner at work, as a school principal, maybe it's your AP, maybe it's your office manager, but having someone close by who can give you that feedback is really, really, it's a game changer. I know
Or
it was for me.
have the kids hold you accountable.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh,
I
and
just,
they love it.
oh my God, do they ever? I decided to take whatever free time I have and put it back into education because I've always liked being an educator. So I just signed up for being what used to be called a substitute teacher. Now they're called reserve teachers.
Oh, okay.
So
Reserve. I like that.
I have my first class tomorrow for a first grade.
Oh my
Class.
goodness. Oh, those
So,
kids are so fortunate to have you.
oh, you think so, huh? I'm going to
I
sit
have
there
my
and go,
condolences. Oh my God.
That'll be
wait
so
till I
much
get,
fun.
wait till I get started with, well, in my day, we didn't even have air to breathe. How do you like that?
Well, Stevie, I want to be mindful of your time. This hour has gone by so quickly. It's 1:02, and I just want to thank you for your wisdom and sharing your wealth of knowledge with our group today. I know I'm sure you're going to be a highly requested person and would love to have you back again if your
I would love to.
schedule. Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah,
And thank
anytime.
you for those in the audience. Stevie has dropped his website into the chat and contact information. We do record these sessions, and you can find the recordings on the Montessori Foundation YouTube channel. That information's also in the chat. Soraya asks that we just tell the audience or remind the audience that just like Montessori, it was such a champion for peace. We do pray for peace for all people all around the world. So thank you to Soraya for that reminder. And thank you again, Stevie, for being here. We'll be back again next week with Rich Sheridan, who'll be talking to us about maximizing our leadership potential. And again, Stevie, thank you. I hope to meet you in person. I have family in the Twin Cities area, so would love to come to one of your improv classes. I know I have so much to learn from you, and am truly grateful for the impact that you're making in the world.
You come on up. We'll get you on stage with the troupe at a show, and you could jump right in.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
One more thing. Stevie never
Yeah.
got to it, but he does a lot of work with people who are blind, autism, all kinds of stuff to get kids more excited and involved. And so thank you, Stevie, for being such a great person to help people out.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stevie. And thanks again to everyone here today. We'll see you next week. Take care.